Happy New Year, everyone! 2023 at Skip the Queue is packed with more amazing guests, and we're starting the new year with a really great one. In today's episode, I speak with Andy Hygate, Director of Operations at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. We're talking about walking the big one and how to develop an exclusive experience from an everyday safety process. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, and all the usual channels by searching Skip the Queue. Andy, welcome to Skip the Queue.
Hello, it's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, it's my pleasure. Just to let everyone know, we're recording this today as we do on YouTube, and I've got this like halo-like effect going over my head.
Light.
I look quite angelic, don't I, Andy?
Christmassy.
Isn't it? It's festive. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel, you will understand what we're talking about. But this is not good podcast material. Sorry, people. Anyway, Andy, we're starting with some icebreakers.
Okay.
I've got a good one for you. So I know that you are a big old roller coaster fan. So I want to know, and this might be a little bit like asking, like, who's your favourite child or who's your favourite dog? But I want to know, what's your favourite roller coaster?
Oh, wow. I mean, it is like, it changes all the time. I mean, that's and so I have kind of a top three, but I've recently been lucky enough to go to Orlando, and I went on a ride there called Iron Gwazi, which is a RMC rework of what was a classic wooden coaster into a steel coaster that's got inversions and so on. And it's one of those rides where it's kind of, if you're a roller coaster fan, it's everything that you want from a roller coaster, from an incredible, I think it's almost beyond vertical first drop. It's got inversions on a wooden structure, but it was one of those rides that just didn't let up until till it hits the brakes at the end. I mean, it blew me away. It was incredible. But then I say that I also went on Velocicoaster, and I was lucky to get in the front seats, and which is at Islands of Adventure. And I went on that at night, and again, I mean, that was an incredible ride. So, at the moment, it's probably between those two. I can't pick a favorite, but both incredible, intense, fabulous, long rides. Really, really good stuff.
Oh, epic. Do you know what? The Velocicoaster, I feel like I've been watching that happen for years on Twitter, because they've been really good at like feeding little snippets of what's been happening before it's launched, like the design of it. And then like, I just feel like I've seen it. It's just been happening for so long.
The weird thing is, sometimes you watch these things on YouTube, particularly if you watch like POVs of rides, and you think you know what the ride is going to ride like. And, we've got a double launch coaster, and effectively that's what Velocicoaster is. But that last inversion, which is really low over the water, you have to go on it to to kind of experience what it's like. I can't describe it to you. It was it's one of those, you think you're coming out, which is not a good thing, but you're obviously not. But it's just, I mean, it just blew me away. Absolutely blew me away.
Amazing. Great recommendation, Andy. All right. Okay. Next one. Who's your idol, and have you ever met them?
I don't know. I mean, there's a roller coaster designer, a German guy called Stengel, who is kind of behind many of the designs of the world's best coasters. I'm a coaster geek, and I'm a big fan of B&M, and I guess I would love to meet them, but I haven't. But I don't know, because because they always say don't meet your heroes, and so I kind of think that I'm not really sure that I would want to.
Keep them at a distance, probably safer. What's the weirdest food you've ever eaten?
Weirdest food? Before I was 5 years old, I'd had more birthdays in America than I'd had in the UK, and I remember on my 5th birthday having an ice cream birthday cake. And the fact that I can still remember this, like 30 whatever years later, I remember that being something that was very unusual at the time. I don't know now, but I mean, that's quite cool, actually. And to be honest, I've got a big birthday coming up in a couple of years, and I'd quite like an ice cream birthday cake for that. Now I'm thinking.
There you go. I
suppose that's weird.
Putting it out there, just getting the hints in already for your big old birthday.
There you go.
Love it. All right, Andy, what is your unpopular opinion? What have you got to share with us?
You know what? I think camping should be banned. and particularly a level above that, glamping. I've got a thing about, I guess, again, for me, if you go on holiday, you want to stay somewhere nice, I think. And I don't get that my experiences of camping are always being freezing cold, being soaking wet, and being covered in mud. And I think there's a different, when you wake up in the morning and you've slept outside effectively, and it's just a different level of cold. And I don't get the whole thing about people saying, oh, I don't know, I'm connecting to nature or the great outdoors. And I actually do like the outdoors. But if I go anywhere, I want to at least stay. If you come to Blackpool, you don't want to be in a tent. You want to be in a
No.
You want to be in a nice hotel, which you can obviously do here. But I don't understand the appeal of it, I mean, I haven't done it for like probably 30 years, but my whole recollection of camping is being freezing cold, soaking wet, and it being thoroughly unpleasant. So yeah, I would ban the tents.
Oh, Andy, that's a really strong opinion, and I like it. Have you ever been glamping? Have you ever done the level up?
I've seen it because it appears. I mean, a lot of places do, particularly, and there seems to be a thing with safari parks. I can't think of anything worse than being asleep in a safari park. You're in like this. It's always a beautiful white tent, isn't it, when it's glamping?
Yeah.
But ultimately, you don't want it. Sleeping next to a lion enclosure, and you think in the middle of the night get picked off by one of the animals. It's just the whole thing is. I'm obviously sound very passionate about this, but glamping is supposed to be, like a luxury, but it's not a luxury. I don't know, having the plastic champagne glasses in a canvas tent is to me is not luxury. Sorry. That sounds awfully posh.
No, do you know what? I think it's my favourite. It's my favourite unpopular opinion of the year.
Okay.
Listeners, let me know what you think over on our Twitter account. If you agree with Andy, it's very strong, unpopular opinion today. Oh, I love that. All right. Well, Andy, I'm going to guess that your background isn't in camping or nature related anyway, but tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. Well, I'm the operations director for Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and I've been here for 8 seasons. But I've worked in attractions for over 20 years. I actually used to work at a famous aquarium in Cheshire for many, many years. I basically had the opportunity to go and run a theme park, a small theme park in Pembrokeshire, down in Wales, a beautiful part of the country, a theme park called Oakwood. And I went and worked there. And one of the reasons I went and worked there is because I've always liked roller coasters. And so from as young as I can remember, I grew up in Kent, and we used to go on day trips to Margate. Not camping trips, and I used to go on the rides at Dreamland there, and I was hooked. I was obsessed with it, and so obviously when I got the chance to go and work at Oakwood, it was a no-brainer because they had big rides, and I learned about rides, how to operate rides, the maintenance involved, and all of that kind of stuff, and then that kind of opened the door really for me to work in other parts, and that's ultimately why I work here. But I think I'm very, very lucky to work in an industry that I'm passionate about, and the fact that I love roller coasters. We've got 10 roller coasters at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and so for me to work with those every day is a real privilege and really good fun. And part of my job is literally to go and ride rides, and if you told me that when I was like 10 years old, I just never would have believed that was a possibility. So
lovely. This comes up quite a lot with our guests actually, because it is an industry that people tend to kind of work in from a young age and then work their way up, and they love it. They really love it, and it's really nice listening to people where they're like, I get to do this for my job. Like, this is fun,
Yeah.
It's really nice to hear. I'm going to guess, Andy, only because you mentioned that you got a big birthday coming up, but I'm going to guess that you are maybe a similar age to me, and you would you would remember Dreamland as Bembon Brothers.
I do, yeah.
Yeah,
Then Brothers
and
Amusement Park.
yeah, because I can remember, because I'm from Essex, and I can remember my granddad taking me to Bembon Brothers when I was really little, and riding the wooden roller coaster that they
Yeah,
had there.
Scenic Railway, yeah. It's
Good
still there.
times. Yeah, good times. Good times. All right. So Andy, today I'm really interested in this. I think this is such a great topic for our listeners. So what we're going to talk about is how you've developed an exclusive experience from an everyday safety procedure. So which sounds crazy, but tell us a little bit about how this idea came about.
Well, it's a strange one, but we're talking about an experience called Walk the Big One. And for those of you that don't know, Blackpool Pleasure Beach has a very large roller coaster, which is still some 25 years later the tallest roller coaster in the UK. A roller coaster called the Big One. It's 235 feet tall, and basically guests can pay to come and walk up the ride after the park closes, up the main pull up, which is the main lift, the sort of slow part at the start of the ride, and we're obviously located right next to the beach, so you get an absolutely spectacular view. And when I say spectacular, it's really difficult to kind of describe. But if you don't know Blackpool at all, the sunsets, something else. I mean, I said I'd just been to Florida, and I think I would say our sunsets are comparable with theirs. Maybe the temperature's not quite the same, but what we were ultimately able to achieve is, roller coasters generally have steps running up the lift hill, and that's no different to our coaster. They're there for safety reasons, so that ultimately if there's a stoppage or you have to clear a train of guests or whatever, that you can walk people down. But by using those, we were able to give people this sort of very unique experience in a controlled and safe way, where they get this unbelievably photogenic and unique experience, which only really, and certainly compared to the number of people that ride the ride, only a handful of people get. When people go on roller coasters, one of the things that you don't want, it's a very sort of modern problem, is trying to stop people from taking photographs or filming on rides, because inevitably they drop their phone. You don't want things falling and all of that kind of stuff. But by doing a controlled walking experience like this, it means that people can get those amazing pictures and so on for and people love putting that on social media and all of that kind of stuff. So how it actually started, though, well, again, there's two versions of this depending on who you speak to, and I can say that because it started before I started working here, so I don't know which one is true. But one of them is that we had a corporate inquiry from a group that had hired out a room and were having an event at the Pleasure Beach, and they wanted to do something different with the boss of the company, and again about taking a crazy photo or whatever, and they asked if they could take them to the top of the Big One. And so they looked into it and the safety aspects and so on, and were able to achieve that. So that's one possibility. And then the other one is that a member of staff went on a trip to Australia and walked up the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and came back and said, that was an amazing experience. Wouldn't that be really cool if we could replicate something like that in the park? And so, depending on who you believe, depends on where this originated from. But all I know is that when I started here, we were running on Friday evenings throughout the year. We were running 3 walks a night, taking groups of 6 people up the structure for an hour. And an hour's the whole thing. So you do a little safety briefing. We kit people up. You'd be pleased to know people are connected with a safety line whilst they're doing this, and we show them how to use it and so on. And then we walk them up the structure to the top. We do it in stages, because I say it's over 70 meters high, so it's 420 steps to the top, and so it's quite, when we do it 3 times in an evening, so our leg muscles are
Nice, good
quite
workouts.
quite quite good. But you basically walk people up and you stop at 50-foot intervals. We tell them a little bit about the history of the ride, and some facts about the ride and so on. And also, what you notice is as you get higher up, you get to see more and more of the park and also beyond the park as well. And you get that different sort of vantage point. And so by the time you get to the summit, which is the bit that everyone's looking forward to, if it's a nice clear day, you can look one way and you can see across the estuary and you can see as far as Southport, and then you look the other way and you can literally see the Lake District, and
Yeah.
and you got the Blackpool Tower, and you can see the whole of the town set out below you, and it's an incredible experience. And even though I've walked up the structures loads of times, for me, I still get a thrill out of doing it, and I'm still always impressed by the view. So for the first time guest that's coming to do it for whatever reason, because we get loads of people doing this we get roller coaster enthusiasts, which obviously you can understand why they would want to do it. But we also get people that are doing it for charity events, and we get people that have had it as a surprise present and they've turned up that evening and didn't know really anything about what they were going to do. And so there's that whole mix of different people doing it, and for different reasons and whatever. And again, once you get to the top, again, other people are getting different things out of it. We get the people that are serious photographers that want the sunset walk,
Yeah.
and so on. And then you get the people that are Facebook crazy and want to do Facebook Live at the top so all their mates can see it, and so on. And it caters really, really for all of those people. What's quite cool is you can start with 6 people that don't even necessarily know each other. Sometimes you do get a group where it's 6 people that do, but we've had it where you've got 6 people haven't met before, and then by the time they get to the end of it and are back down on the ground, there's this kind of camaraderie that's been built up by having this experience. And they're always towards the start, because it's us that do it, it's the rides team that walk up. They're always so sort of appreciative, and I think finding out stuff that you wouldn't find out normally when you visit, little tips and facts about the ride, and little interesting oddities about how roller coasters work and so on, makes it a really good experience. So yeah, I mean, the I know that was a very long answer
Oh, it's
to.
a great answer. It's a great
Yeah.
answer, but it leads me on to some of the questions that I've got about like what's it brought the attraction, because you talked there about a lot. So there was a lot to take in there, and some of the things you talked about were, when people go up, you've got these incredible views and people want to take photos of that. They want to do Facebook Lives. I guess you've got so many different audiences that appeals to as well, like the roller coaster nuts, or just people that just want that, Instagram moment. What is it brought the attraction?
I think for us, it's brought us into the experience market in a way which is something that we wouldn't have necessarily. I mean, the roller coaster was never built with that in mind. It was obviously built as a thrill ride, and the fact there are stairs there, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about Walk the Woody later on, but the stairs are there for a functional reason, and so you can do track inspections, and so that in the event there's a stoppage, there's a way for people to get down in a safe way and so on. And I think it's being able to make use of something that's already there or existing in a different way, that's also such a sort of such a memorable way. And invariably, I said, for all those people doing those different things, whether it's taking photos and posting them on social media, or whether it's Instagram, or whether it's Facebook, or whatever it is that they're doing it for. And we have seen, particularly over the last 5 years doing it, there is I think this explosion in experiences and experience culture, and people wanting, instead of you're buying an experience ultimately, and then you're showing other people that you've done that experience. That's a big part of what social media is, and a big motivator for doing it. But I think it's great that you can have that mix of people, and you even get the people that quietly. We've had people that live in Blackpool that can see the structure from their house, because it's a tall structure, that have always just been curious about it and just want to come and walk up it. And that's what's great, that you get that mix, really.
Well, it's opened up the park to a different, I guess, because those people might not have come along and come on and you know, taken a ride on the roller coaster or spent the day at the park, but they would come along in the evening and walk up it, and to see, you know, be able to spot their house from the top of it, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true, and also it's, you know, you get people that are driven up from London, you know, which is quite a long way from us, and so on, to do an experience which is, you know, pretty unique. I mean, it's certainly unique in our location, and so on. And I think again that sort of all those different reasons for doing it is makes it a really good thing. And I also think we're catering for a desire to have an adventure. I mean, roller coasters ultimately are that as well. I mean, the great thing about roller coasters is that people are searching for a thrill and an experience. I mean, even me talking about those rides that I was talking about before, you know, I was absolutely thrilled or blown away by them, and so on. But people want to go on a ride where you have the illusion of danger, but ultimately, in reality, it's actually a very safe experience. And actually, you could relate this to that as well. This experience, you know, walking up something, you're at a very high height, you're on a slender gantry, and the structure moves as it's designed to. It's good that it moves in the wind, and so on. You wouldn't want it to be brittle, and so on. That all adds to the adventure. So you're getting that experience, but in a way which is actually a really safe way of doing it.
Yeah. It's brilliant. So it's still incredible to me that something that you would have done on a daily basis anyway, you've been able to develop into this incredible experience. So it's brought you, you know, a different audience. It's obviously brought you more revenue, right? So you mentioned earlier you do 3 walks.
Yeah, so we take six people on each walk, and you know, they pay obviously for that experience, and it's a premium priced experience because you're getting something which is a small group of people. It's after the park is closed, and all of that side of it. But I think people are and this is with, you know, the experience economy, or the, you know, people looking for those things. People are prepared to pay extra for one. You're getting that level of service and insight that you wouldn't get necessarily normally, in that, you know, talking directly to people that work on the ride and know about the ride and so on. If you were here as a visitor, you'd probably just queue up and go on the ride, have a great experience, find it thrilling, and then off you go. Where people like to, I think, have a curiosity about, you know, the behind the scenes, how things work, and so on. And Walk the Woody is the which is the version of this that we do on our wooden coasters, or one of our wooden coasters, is the classic example of something where we've taken something that we have to do every day. So this is roller coaster geek in me. There's 2 different types of coasters. There's still coasters, which are the ones that you find where they invert, and most modern coasters are still coasters. And then you get wooden coasters. And Blackpool Pleasure Beach we're really lucky to have 4, which is really unusual. Classic wooden coasters, all built in the 1920s and 30s. I mean, these rides are, you know, rides like the Grand National and so on, which are iconic rides. When you think of our park, if you ask people about our park, they'll mention those rides. But for me, the fact that people want to come ride a wooden coaster that's, you know, 90 years, it's been thrilling people, when they still find it a thrilling ride, and still want to go on it, and so on. I think that's incredible, that people want to do that. And that what that says is those attractions, even if they were built in the 1930s, are still brilliant attractions, and that people still want to come and ride them. Now, with part of looking after and the maintenance of a wooden coaster is that you do daily inspections of them, and you literally walk the entire track of the ride, which you can do on a wooden coaster, because unlike on a steel coaster, you've got a walkway literally the entire length of the ride. And so we have an in-house structures team and construction team here, which is part of how we maintain the coasters and are able to keep them going, and so on. Have to walk the entire track every day, and so every morning before the park opens, nice and early, doesn't matter what the weather is, our team of structures people will come and walk alongside the entire track, carrying out an inspection. They're making sure there's no problems, no issues, no rot, no nails where they shouldn't be, all of those kind of things, so that the ride's ultimately safe to open. And with this stuff I'm talking about, with the experience, offering experiences, we suddenly thought, well, wouldn't it be great if the general public had the opportunity to do something that this very selected group of people were having to do every single day of the year when we're open? And that's really how that experience came about. And I think what the big one gave us the confidence to look at other rides and other attractions that we've got, and start to think, actually, what is it that we do that people would pay to come and do as well? And Walk the Woody 100% came out of that.
It's absolutely brilliant. And I think when we spoke briefly before today, you mentioned that you've got special merchandise that people can buy, and do they get a piece of Woody?
Yeah, so
don't worry, folks, it is structurally sound, but they do get a piece of Woody.
No, I have to say, with wooden coasters, people, and I can use this, you can't I said this to some of my American friends, and they had no clue what I was talking about. But wooden roller coasters, it's like triggers, and part of the maintenance of them is that you're working on them, and you're constantly replacing the wood. So actually, how much of the structure, the original structure, is still there 100 years later or whatever. And anyway, so we're always carrying out that work. And when we did Walk the Big One, we wanted people to take away something after the experience, and actually I've got one here to hold up for you. So
brilliant.
We get this, you get this medal at the end of it, and it's, for some people, particularly if you're scared of heights, which we do get, it's a big, it's an achievement if you've made it to the top and all of that kind of stuff. And invariably what actually happens with that as well is that when you get down and you give them the medal, they all immediately have their photo taken with it and so on. And so again, it feeds into all the stuff I was saying about social media and so on. So anyway, with Walk the Woody, we thought, well, wouldn't it be nice if we could do something like that? And we thought about a medal and so on. And then we thought, well, hang on a minute, we've got all this wood that we've removed from the ride as we've replaced and updated it. Why don't we chop it up into little pieces and give people a piece of the ride to take?
It's a genius idea. Not only is it a brilliant piece of memorabilia, it's sustainable too.
Well, yeah, exactly. And actually what's cool about it is the wood itself. It often has, you can see like the rungs of where the original growth in the tree and so on in it. And it's a really nice piece. But people always want the chunk that's got like the nails sticking out of it, or the bit with the flaky paint or whatever it is, just because it's all there's a certain, again, this whole experience thing, people want authenticity. And I think that just plays into that. And also, if you're going back and afterwards and you got home and you're telling your friends or your family what you've done, if you're producing a piece of wood from that very ride that's a piece of history and all of that kind of stuff, it just adds to the thing. So yeah, I mean, we always say to people that do it, look, we don't do any hard sell or anything. At the end of the you get those things as part of the experience regardless, but then we do some merch which is exclusive. I mean, I'm wearing one of the Walk the Big One pieces of clothing which we only sell to people that have been on the walk that evening. So the guests in the park can obviously, when they come and visit, they can buy Big One mugs and pin badges and Big One everything if that's what they want, of course. But you can only get this stuff by participating in the experience. So it makes it quite special, really.
Yeah, it does. It is brilliant. I mean, it really, we're recording this episode in the run up to Christmas, listeners, but this will launch, this is obviously going out in the new year. And I think this is such a good message to start the year on. And it's something that has been talked about at a number of the Alva meetings that I've been to. And it's something the industry's been talking about for in the run up to Christmas is about that level of of experience and doing things that are different, because it is what people are absolutely craving for, and they will be happy to pay the higher price point for doing something that's really special and something that's really unique and just something that's of real interest to them as well. You know, you're hooking into people's real kind of desires with these kind of unique experiences. I think this is such a brilliant story. Your dates sell out really quickly as well, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, we've just put on our 2023 dates online, and what we find is, well, because of the social media aspect of it, there's a lot of word of mouth about it anyway, and also we get a lot of repetition, because again, I think it's because it's so unique. But in the case of Walk the Big One, the other thing that we find, because we do it sort of from March, but we also do it through until the autumn. You can come along in, I don't know, in the spring and do it, and it can be sunshine and lovely and bright and so on. But then you hear that actually you can come back and you can do it in September when the illuminations are on in Blackpool, when it's dark, and the experience takes on a whole different thing altogether. And it's, to walk up in effectively in the darkness and just see the lights along the front going miles along the coastline is a beautiful
I bet
very different experience.
Yeah, I bet that's amazing. Do you get that, a lot of repeat visits for something like this?
Yes, what you do is you'll find that those people that do it in the spring, we say, oh yeah, we do it in September, and they say, oh, I didn't know that, and so that happened certainly early on with it. We were finding that people came back to do it, and then obviously once it built up a bit of a reputation, when we started thinking about these, like Walk the Woody with the wooden coasters, what you found is that people that had done Walk the Big One and knew it was a really fun experience, had a great time, suddenly thought, oh well, actually, I want to try that as well, and I think it was emotive in a different way, because with the big one, obviously it's really tall and there's no getting away from that. And the thing is, the payoff on that one is that you're going to get that amazing view right at the top and so on. We've walked the Woody because we've walked the track on the Big Dipper. You're not going to go as high at all because the ride's only 60 feet tall and so on. It's a different experience, but it's in some ways, I don't want to say more fulfilling, because they're fulfilling for different reasons, but it's certainly more challenging because you're walking a lot more of the track than you would do on Walk the Big One. But also it's that sort of that insight that you're getting and that understanding of how the ride's maintained, how it works. And as much as I can describe to you what it's like to walk along a roller coaster track, the thing, when you actually do it, you suddenly get sort of some kind of you get a realization of the bit that always shocks people is that we start at the end of the ride and we actually walk backwards, and you walk from where the brake run is, so where the ride would normally end, and you do the last little bunny hops, which are the last part of the ride when you're on it, and you do them first. When you're on the ride, because the ride's coming to an end, those little bunny hops don't feel like the first drop. You think, that's the end of the ride. They're not very big and so on. When you have to walk them, actually you realise that what you thought were small bunny hops are actually quite large and steep and so on. And it gives people a different appreciation for the ride. And so we've had people that have done Walk the Woody and then gone back on the Big Dipper when they've come back to the park as a regular visitor, and said that it's totally changed the way that they view the ride, and they've got a totally different appreciation for it and how we maintain it, how we look after it, all the work that goes into it, but also an understanding of the scale of these things and so on. And you would never get that if just by going on the ride itself, I suppose.
That's really cool, isn't it? I mean, there must have been with both of the rides, the Walk the Big One and Walk the Woody, there must have been some challenges that you had in terms of opening this up to general public. I'm sure health and safety was an absolute nightmare. What kind of challenges did you come across, and how did you overcome them? And what would be your advice for other attractions that were kind of looking maybe to do similar, or just looking at things that they already have that they could make more of?
As an idea, I mean, what I would say to people is don't be afraid of an idea. I think, it was true when we when we first came up with Walk the Woody and said, this is what we want to do, or we want to try and do it, before we'd even touched the ride or even looked at what the reality of doing that, I do remember, being told by several people, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to do that not with the general public. It's not going to work. Then there's this problem, this problem, this problem, and all that. And we kind of chipped away at those things and thought, well, okay, well, we know that we do this every day with our staff. How do they do it safely? And so what do they know that we don't? And then so we spoke to them and we started doing risk assessments and all the sort of boring stuff, I guess, but the stuff that you really do need to do. And then we did some practices and we literally walked the entire track with a team of the operations staff, in conjunction with engineering, and worked out a way to make it work. And some of the challenges were, one, because whenever you do anything different, you have to convince some people that it's going to work. Two, you've got to make it, whatever you're doing, safe. But what I've found is that by actually physically having a go at stuff and getting input from other people and feedback and so on, we were able, in the case of the Walk the Woody, we were able to work out a route that we thought, actually we could do this with the general public. There were bits of it where, there's some of the ride, you don't walk the entire track, you walk probably about a third of it during the experience. There were some bits of it where I thought, actually, I'm not sure that this is going to work really well with the public. I'm not sure what they would get out of that. I'm not sure if this is too challenging, this bit, and so on. And we sort of just crafted it into something which also had to work in a certain amount of time, and so on. So I guess my advice would just be, don't be afraid to think about doing something that you haven't done before. I'd actually look to, we've got a great team of people that I work with in my department, and often it's just by chatting to people you can come up with these ideas, which at first might sound silly or whatever, but I remember us talking about it, and someone saying, wouldn't it be fun if we could do what you walk in the footsteps of the engineers? And that's actually sounded really exciting, before you've even heard what it is. It's peeking behind the I don't know, the curtain to see how things work and so on. And there's a natural sort of curiosity to do that. So I would say to any other attraction that's, they will have stuff which is unique to them, which people would be interested in having that experience. And the trouble with, I think, one of the things that we always warn our staff about just generally is that in terms of guest service in an amusement park, there's a massive difference between visiting an amusement park for one day as a guest, maybe once or twice a year, and going to an amusement park every single day because you work there. You have to be really careful when you work there. You don't become complacent and you lose that air of magic that a guest will have when they go there just once or once a year or whatever. And so, we do a lot of reinforcement with our own staff to make sure that they're remembering that that's the first time that the guest has seen that, when you might have seen it or experienced it 500 times. I think that aspect of it's quite important as well.
That's really good advice, actually, and that's really interesting, isn't it? Because we always talk about that it's the people that make the experiences, but those people have to genuinely still be excited about it, even though they've seen that thing 50 billion times, because it's the visitor's first time of seeing it, and they need to be equally as excited about it as that person that's seen it for the first time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, on these experiences, that aspect of it actually becomes easy and quite infectious, because what you see, particularly we've involved some of our seasonal staff in delivering these events, and they get massive amount out of it, and they've learned that they learn a few facts or a few stories or whatever, and they retell them. The reaction that they get from the people that are stood in front of them when they're stood on the ride talking about it is always positive, and that builds their confidence. I've seen members of staff go from being shy and retiring to being stood 150 feet up the big one talking to the general public, answering questions, pointing out things on the horizon, all of that kind of stuff. And I'm quite proud of the fact that we've been able to achieve that, both for the guest and also for the staff as well.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's really interesting as well. We in a couple of weeks on from this episode, we have an episode speaking to the London Transport Museum, and it's all about innovation and fostering a culture of innovation. And what you said earlier about, don't be afraid to have those ideas and come up with those ideas with your team. I think that just goes to show that you have fostered a culture where people are comfortable to bring those kind of ideas for the front, regardless of how crazy they might seem at that point. But they're encouraged to bring those ideas to you and to see where they can go.
Yeah, and we've done, and that we've been lucky that also continues. I mean, Walk the Woody, we're really excited about 2023 because the ride that you're basically walking, which is the Big Dipper roller coaster, is 100 years old next year. So it's got a big birthday coming, a big centenary, and so on. And so we were thinking about Walk the Woody and thinking, well, actually, what can we do now that we've done it and we know how to do it and so on? What can we do differently because it's his birthday coming up, and people are excited about it, enthusiasts know about it, and expecting us to do something and so on. And so we started looking at what we could do differently, and so we've come up with a product for 1 year only for next year, which is a version of Walk the Woody, but it's called Walk the Woody 100 for obvious reasons. and but we're going to do it differently, and so again, it's about not just resting on our laurels. We've come up with something which is we think guests are going to like. We went through a very similar process to how we came up with the original idea, but we went back to the idea and thought, well, actually, what can we do that we didn't do last time, and what would be different? And we've now got the experience of people telling us what they liked about it, and so on. And so I'm not going to tell you exactly what we're doing because we want it to be
Don't ruin it.
bit of a surprise, but we are going to do something different with it next year. So people that have done it before can come and they will have a different experience, and people that don't know anything about it or whatever, and maybe they're hearing about it on this, I don't know, will come and have a 100th birthday special version of the experience. So it's always about innovation and keeping things moving and trying to come up with other stuff. And and in this particular instance, the fact that it's the ride's 100th birthday, which is a big deal really for a ride, was the motivator, but it could be for any other reason as well.
Love it. It's, again, brilliant advice, Andy. It is about coming up with these unique ideas with things that you already have, generating that kind of repeat interest from people that have been on it once but can come back and do it. And then you're expanding on that again by developing on the experience because there's a big event or a big thing happening that year. I think it's such good advice for attractions. So thank you for sharing today. What else have you got coming up? Is there anything else that's coming next?
We're always looking. I mean, obviously the Walk the Woody 100 is the big thing. We've done Walk the Woody, but we haven't done it in the way that we're going to do it next year. And I think making it unique just for 1 year. So we're only going to do it like this for 1 year for its birthday. It's kind of a cool thing. But I haven't mentioned our other experience, which is Walk the Big One XL, which I probably should, because in a way that's a similar kind of. We only introduced that in 2022, and so that's a relatively new version. But what we did with that, and so this will be the second year that we've offered this. This was quite targeted, and it was targeted at enthusiasts. And I said that I'm a ride enthusiast, and so we knew that there was this demand there for people to find out more. And Walk the Big One, it's an amazing experience, but it's done in an hour. You're here and gone in an hour. And we thought, well, for an enthusiast, you know, which is fine for a lot of people, but for enthusiasts, they might want to know a little bit more, and they might want to see some other locations around the ride. So again, we revisited Walk the Big One, and thought, actually, what is it that we can do differently that would specifically target that group of people that want to see more, or you know, want to know more in-depth information. And so again, we went and looked at the ride. Again, we were careful not to get blinded by the fact that we see, you know, things like the brake run every day. So for us, that's not a big deal. But actually, for a guest to come and stand on the brake run, learn about the station design, learn why it's the way it is, how we put trains on and off the ride, and so on, is actually, to them, is actually really interesting, because that's not something that they get to see or hear about every day. And so we worked out a way to take people to different locations on the ride, including a couple of locations that we'd never been to really with guests before, which we've got a platform, and because the big one is a gravity driven ride like a lot of roller coasters. So what that means, in case you don't know, is the train is taken up to its highest point, usually with the click 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 noise on a chain, and that's the anti-rollback, because you don't want to go backwards down the hill. And then when the train is released at the top, it's free rolling, and there's no brakes on the train. It's only when it gets to a block section, which is either part way round or near the end of the ride, that you can actually stop the train. So roller coasters, particularly in our case, which are built right next to the sea, can be affected by wind and so on. You have to make sure that, you know, in the event that a train dipped or didn't make the course, maybe it was slowed down by the wind or whatever, although we do monitor that while we're operating, obviously. So, but in the rare occasion that something like that could happen, that you could get people off. So what that means is you have platforms around the ride where if the ride stopped for whatever reason, again, gravity would kick in, a train would stop at the lowest point, and you've got to be able to go and get to that train and take people off. And so we thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if you could take people to those locations, and they can stand on them and get to go out again, bits which you would never normally get to go anywhere near. And so we take people we take them to the breaks first, as I said, then we take them out on. So there's one that has a particularly good view of the beach and the sea, and so on. So we deliberately, because it's the most photogenic, we take people there, and they get to stand on the platform next to the track, and they get some amazing photos that you would never normally be able to get. And then we take them to the block break, and we were quite deliberate in this, in that we were increasing the height throughout the experience, and so each location that you went to was higher up than the one before, so it effectively gets more exciting as the event goes on. And the block breaks sort of, you know, 110 feet off the ground or whatever. And again, people always, if you've been to the ride, you think that it's near the end of the ride, it's not that exciting, and people, when you walk them up it, are suddenly shocked at actually how tall it is, and the view that you get across the whole park. You get, again, these wonderful photos, and people are, the feedback that we get from guests when we do that is they just couldn't believe that they were able to be up in that location. And then we end effectively with the regular Walk the Big One, so we take people right to the top of the ride. It's a much longer experience, so the whole thing lasts about 90 minutes, and you get that much more sort of in-depth. You know, if you're a coaster geek, then you're going to love hearing all of this, and the fact that you get to go to all of these places. And we deliberately walk people through the staff routes through the park rather than the guest route through the park.
That's cool.
So again, they get to see bits that they would never normally get to walk, and so on. And so again, it's it'll be our second year of doing it, and I'm really sort of proud of the fact that that we're able to, you know, if you're a roller coaster enthusiast, and you come and Walk the Big One XL, you're really, you know, we're hopefully going to deliver you an absolutely, you know, a proper geeky, in-depth look at how a roller coaster is operated. And again, that's going right back to the start of it. It's offering an experience that, you know, you're almost offering, although you do have to pay for it, it's almost like a money can't buy experience, because to be able to do that is really rare.
Yeah, I guess as you were talking, when you were talking about, you know, taking guests through the operators way through and not the guest way through. I was like, it's really an alignment to being like a zookeeper for the day and doing, being behind the scenes on that kind of thing, that kind of level.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And then, it's just that, and you end up going through routes that, you go through a gate that, that to us is a gate that we go through every day and we're not bothered about it. But to a guest, it's somewhere in the park they've never set foot in before. It's underneath the structure of another ride. They can get a photo of somewhere where, they wouldn't be able to go normally. All of that stuff. It just adds to that feeling of, one, it makes the person feel special because they're being given, information and a look at stuff that they could never normally see, and two, they're getting this experience that runs alongside it that's just a really, hopefully for them, a really memorable experience. And then they get all this other stuff, optional stuff, at the end of it as well. And I think one of the big bits of feedback that we have about it, and it was interesting that you said about the people, and I do think that's, you can take people to all of these cool places, but you do need people. It's the bit that brings it alive is the staff talking about it, particularly when it's staff that work on the ride and have that knowledge of the ride and know the park and all of that kind of stuff. It's those bits and pieces that when we get feedback about this, they're the bits that people really love and really kind of latch onto. And I'm pleased that we're able to deliver that for people.
Oh, it's brilliant. I've loved talking to you, Andy. This has been so interesting to hear about. And I love how passionately you talk about it. You genuinely love it. And it really comes across when you talk.
Hopefully, roller coasters are fun ultimately, aren't they? But to be able to do these kind of things with roller, I think back, I was saying when I was a kid going to Dreamland or whatever, if I could have walked up the roller coaster in Dreamland, I would have been the happiest kid in the world. So we're trying to offer that, I guess, now to.
Well, there you go, Andy. You got your big birthday coming up. I hope you're listening, Dreamland, because you know what will make Andy happy for his birthday. You should do a little hookup, maybe do a little trade with their team and your team.
I'd love to.
Brilliant, Andy. What book have you got to share with us today? We always ask our guests to share a book with our listeners.
Yeah, I've picked a book by a film director called Derek Jarman, and it's a book called Modern Nature. And don't worry, it's got nothing to do with camping or anything like that. But really, why it's sort of an inspirational person to me. But why it's important to me is it's based around, the guy lived effectively in a beach hut in Dungeness, which is down in Kent, which is where I'm from originally, in a situation which is considered by many to be it's somewhere that's not that far from where my parents live. It's probably about 20 minutes drive, and to some people you would describe, particularly in the winter, you describe it as bleak. And it's a pebble beach and so on. And there's something about the English coastline and beaches and so on that I really like. And I like the fact that we have seasons. I like Blackpool in the summer, but I actually like it in the winter as well. And this book is kind of like a diary, really, about how he's built a pebble garden, because it is literally on the beach, in the shadow of a nuclear power station, which sounds horrible, but actually I think it's a really inspirational thing. And I think you can see beauty in stuff which is unconventional, and so on. And that the fact that he's managed to build a pebble garden and have plants in an area which is a harsh environment that can be seen as bleak, but actually I think there's great beauty in that, and that all comes across in that book. And it's very inspirational, conversational style, makes it a really memorable book for me. And it's also somewhere where whenever I go back to Kent, I always go down there for fish and chips. And there's something, it sounds really strange, but sitting in the car in the winter having fish and chips and listening to the power station humming in the background, it's actually really sort of reassuring. I don't know.
It's not an experience I've ever had, Andy. I feel like I'm going to have to add that one to my list.
I realise that sounds really odd, but I guess I've got an emotional connection to that place as well. And the fact that someone's written a whole book about it and their connection to it is what connects with me. So yeah, that's probably my choice.
I think that is a great book choice, Andy. I've never heard of that book, but I'm absolutely going to check it out. Listeners, if you want to win a copy of Andy's book, you know what to do. Go over to our Twitter account, retweet this episode announcement, and you'll be in with a chance of winning it. Andy, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you today. I think this is a wonderful podcast to start the new year off on. So thank you for coming on and sharing with us. And I look forward to joining you up in Blackpool at some point to walk the Woody.
Yeah, you must do. We're looking forward to it. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Skip the Queue. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find us. And remember to follow us on Twitter for your chance to win the books that have been mentioned. Skip the Queue is brought to you by Rubber Cheese, a digital agency that builds remarkable systems and websites for attractions that helps them increase their visitor numbers. You can find show notes and transcriptions from this episode and more over on our website, rubbercheese.com/podcast.